Welcome to the first playing test of this old Laney Supergroup. And while there are great strides forward in its overall sound, there are things about it which still bother me. Number one, you can definitely hear that it's on, even with the volumes both off. There's a little bit of a buzz, and I'm going to look into that. That could be a multitude of things. I guess I'll get to some of the bigger stuff in a little bit. Let's start with gain 2 here for channel 2, which says treble, and this one says bass. I added a bright cap on each one. In stock form, this came with a very, very large value bright cap, which made this painful. And this one actually was rolling high end off through a 10 nanofarad cap to ground off the wiper of this pot. I have changed them both to be bright switches, and I did 100 picofarad on both because I had those caps lying around. I like the value on this one. This one's still a little too bright. I think I'm going to change that to a 47. And my rationale on that is when you have the volume in the lowest range, especially on a neck pickup humbucker, it can just be a little bit dark at the lower ranges of the volume pot. So if that's a very small value cap, it'll just take some of that out. That's a little too bright, but it gets the idea. And then as you turn the volume pot up, that cap does less and less. But right now, that 100 picofarad is too bright. Let me go to the other channel where I think it's just about right. This channel is always going to be brighter than this channel because of the treble cap across the mix resistor. Think of it like a 5.6A Bassman or JTM 45 or Marshall 1987, which all have variations on the same basic idea. So here, so that's actually sounding quite nice. That's the right value cap for this channel. And if I go to a much smaller cap for this channel, they'll both have that flexibility without either one being bright. And if you want, this channel can be a little bit darker than this channel if the bright caps are off. Before I go any farther, I want to say that whoever designed this at Laney never used an amplifier on stage. The knobs are very frustrating in that the position numbers are on the bottom. So there's a little indicator line, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What, you have to duck down to see. We're at 4 now. So 4 on the volume sounds like this. And I happen to know that that's more gain than the owner of this amp wants. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Right below that, let's go to 3, which is here. It's very non-intuitive because your eye sees this and it's at 9 up top. That's all sounding pretty nice. And the tone stack is much more responsive now than it was before. So I guess with that at 5.5. That's just in between 0 and 10 up here. So I'm gonna set these back to noon. Like I said, it's very non-intuitive. If I had to use this amp live, I'd take these very pretty old knobs off and put on chicken heads. So I would know where my noon is and my 10 is. It's funny how, visual hierarchies work. We know how a Fender works. This is backwards to a Fender. We know how a Marshall works or a Vox. This is the antithesis of all that. This is a strange outlier. So the beginning of gain is a little bit earlier than the owner would like it, I'm pretty sure. And what that has to do with is two things. Number one, this has the Marshall 12AX7, 12AX7, 12AX7. And I'm very sure that the owner of this amp will be much happier with this amp with a 12AY7 in V1, like on some of the Tweed Fenders. Just to take some of that initial push out, give a later breakup, and that's an easy thing to do. So 12AY7, then two 12AXs should do a lot for that. The other thing is this amp is very low filtered. In stock form, it came in with 32 microfarad, then 16, 16, 16, 16. A JTM 45 would have been 32, 32, 16, 16, 16. And I have changed this to 32, 30, 30, 16, 16, trying to make it what it was designed to be, which is equivalent to like a 1966 solid state rectified JTM 45, which is a model that they didn't make for very long. They started doing all kinds of experimenting in 66, 67. But that's what this amp is, essentially. It has a split cathode rather than shared. Other than that, all the values are from, and the mix resistors are different from a early JTM 45. So kind of transitional from the JTM to the JMP stuff. In addition to giving an earlier breakup from the low filtering, it also means that the breakup is a little bit mushy. It's not very defined, and there is ghost noting apparent, especially if I play higher up on the neck pickup. Now, if someone out there is a huge Tony Iommi fan, you take the same SG into a Rangemaster treble booster into this amp, and that ghosting is both decreased because there's less low end feeding the amp, and but it is still there in the background, and you can hear that on some of the Sabbath records. But you can also hear there's a fizziness. So here's where this gets almost into philosophy. This is a vintage amp. And there are people out there who will be glad to tell you how wonderful it is just by nature of it being from 1969. It is a copy of a Marshall. It is a more cheaply made copy of a Marshall, and it is a copy of a Marshall model that Marshall had phased out because of the sounds you just heard with the ghosting and the raggedness. It just can't keep up. For this amp to be its best, it would really need to have the later JMP filtering. So instead of 32 microfarad for the first stage, I would give it 100. Instead of 30 for the screen and phase inverter, I would give it 50. Especially instead of 16 for the two preamps nodes, I would give it at least 30. I would probably go up to 50. Just say, let's make this ring really solid. And that will do a couple things. It will take away the ghosting. It will take away some of that fizziness, which is a lot of stuff just not having the DC there. People talk about sag. This thing is kind of sagging in the worst possible way. It will give a later distortion and transition into distortion. Now, the 12AY7 will help with that a lot as well. And that's what would make this a much better sounding amp. But at that point, is it really a Laney from 1969, or is it a Sonic Audio hybrid, 69 and 2021? So after this video, I will talk to the owner after he gets a chance to see it. The amp has a lot of potential. And if I were to, aside from this bright cap being too bright, I could send it out the way it is now. It's solid, it's reliable, is not as quiet as I could make it. But it's quite good. That buzz, which is bothering me, is lower in level than probably any Laney from 1969 ever had from the factory. So this is much quieter and better behaved than you would have found in these things brand new. I just know I can get that better, and so I want to. I know I can make the sound more correct for the owner in every aspect, and I want to. Part of that's going to depend on how much the owner wants to put into it. And to answer the inevitable question, normally, yes, the channels could be jumpered, but there's no additional jack for this. So you can't really jumper this model. I could repurpose one of these switches to be a jumper switch, but I don't think it's necessary. The amp already has more gain per channel than the owner will ever want. In fact, he's going to want that dialed back. And like I said, a 12AY7 will do wonders. So that's SG stuff, which I thought was appropriate given the IOMI association. Let me show a little bit of nice stuff with the Strat, just to show how versatile this amp can be. Trying to find the noon position on the tone stack again, since the lettering is useless for us. Of interest to people, maybe the bright cap, which is on here now, which I find a little too bright, is the same value bright cap you would find on many JTM45s from this era. But on those, you can jumper the channels, so you can blend in the darker, fuller bass channel on a JTM45. The channels have identical low end response, though this one has a little bit of an upper mid and presence, upper mid and treble boost, just due to the cap across the mix resistors. But the two channels aren't that different from each other. Now you hear this, I've got the volume here at, what do I have it at? 4 now, which is where we had a lot of breakup with those humbuckers. A lot less with the Strat. This with the bright switch off. Turn the treble up a little bit. You hear that? That's something physically vibrating in this chassis. I'll track that down. But as you can hear, the amp overall is sounding quite nice now. It's just not great. And I get frustrated. I see so many videos out there on the internet talking about vintage amps. And people ascribe all kind of magical abilities to them. And most of those people don't seem to know what they're talking about. I'm not going to call anyone out by name, but there's this guy, well known for getting a whole bunch of expensive vintage amps and testing them really loud through, full stacks and using headphones so he doesn't go completely deaf. And I've seen a lot of misinformation about how the amps are built and work on those things. And people just get in, they're led to value the wrong things, in my opinion. And that opinion is not because I want to be contrary. It's not because I want to be the source of all information. It's very empirical. When you've played and heard an awful lot of vintage amps, you start to realize that not all vintage amps are great. They're just old. And the ones which are great for real reasons, which are repeatable. And remember, the concept of vintage does not mean old. It means that was a particularly good year. You could have 2 bottles of wine, both 50 years old. One of them is a great vintage wine, one of the best you'll ever drink in your life. The other is vinegar. And unless you are a true expert, you won't know which is which.